help towards this mission on ensuring that our measures are risk-based. First, of course, we operationalized the PBO Act in 2024, and this is a much more comprehensive regime because in Kenya, we were using the NGO Coordination Act as well as many other laws that were not harmonized. So the PBO Act attempts to harmonize the way we regulate nonprofit organizations and provides a more robust framework. So it also includes aspects on self-regulation, which give more room for risk-based measures, because in that case, the organizations themselves are forced to put in internal measures to address these risks, which is often sometimes what's needed. We need to think about self-regulation. We need to think about how we can increase our capacity as individual organizations to respond to some of these risks. We also conducted the first risk assessment for the NPO sector in 2024, and this now for the first time classified nonprofit organizations as being at medium to low risk, low to medium risk. And it also had more evidence-based analysis on which kind of organizations might be at risk, but it had also some significant challenges, including identifying that 8 features of organizations make them high risk, and these are mostly sometimes geographical considerations, whether they can verify their accounts and the funding that they receive. But more problematically, it says that NPOs that are at risk include the ones that work in communities that are sympathetic to terrorism. I have a challenge with this because it's not easy to define it legally. And also, sympathetic to terrorism has been used numerously with a bid to target Muslim human rights organizations in particular. So we need to be very careful about this and to follow up, call out some of these issues around this, because if you combine some of the risks, including that they operate along the Somali border, they are faith-based organizations, which are also classified as high risk, just inherently. They're faith-based organizations, they work along the border, and they are accused of being sympathetic, working in communities sympathetic to terrorism. This poses a major risk of these type of organizations being targeted, particularly the ones working at the coast and in northeastern province, where there also happens to be, dealing with the major threat of terror attacks in these counties. Other than that, this year, our Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act, I apologize for the abbreviation there. The POCAMLA is the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act. It was revised in 2025 to remove non-profit organizations from the list of sectors that need to be under high scrutiny because of overexposure to terror financing risks. So that was changed, and now it means that non-profit organizations are supposed to have less stringent measures just around their oversight, and this is around increasing their awareness of these risks and showing individual organizations how to mitigate these threats. This is because of the low risk that we pose. The same Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act was also amended earlier in 2023, providing for a more proportionate approach and calling for risk-based measures in line with what the Financial Action Task Force now recommends. The sector assessment that we did in 2024, some of the other findings also generally, they called on the PBORA, that is the Public Benefit Organizations Regulation Authority, formerly the NGO Board. It called on them to develop a more comprehensive approach to conducting outreach, because they are mandated under the under the POCAMLA, the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act, to do this, to provide support to NGOs on these issues, and so does the Prevention of Terrorism Act. You need to provide support and knowledge, because this is usually an area that's not very well understood, including by our regulators and representatives of government themselves. Capacity is a problem overall. Yes, and generally to focus more on awareness-raising activities rather than stringent supervision. So in 2025, Tanzania and Uganda were also removed from the grey list, providing us with successful advocacy models as we think of how we can create change in Kenya. It's useful to think about countries that have been able to exit this, because usually for your country to exit the grey list, you have to demonstrate cooperation between different sectors so that the framework is improved, improving the framework for how we deal with terrorism financing. So this includes a large chunk of ensuring that different sectors like NPOs have knowledge on this and are also contributing to policy conversations and engagements. So how can we respond to these problems? First, we need to think from the perspective of advocacy and how we engage policy-wise. This is, Hussein said it right, we need to think about partnership. It's difficult to address some of these things from the sector if we are not working collaboratively. So particularly with financial institutions and government, because as I said, banks also put in constraints for us, which make it difficult for us to access our accounts, also to access funding from different sources. Yes, so we need to think about partnering with these groups, particularly to change the law and also to comply with the FATF standards. Other than that, we need to influence the way the national risk assessments are conducted, where the participation needs to be meaningful. For the first time in 2024, non-profit organizations were involved. Muhuri and Kenya National Civil Society Center were the organizations involved in that risk assessment. But those are just two groups and might not always represent, it's not representative of the entire civil society. We also need to provide guidelines. We need to work together to provide guidelines for how we can work in a more risk-based approach. That's really important. The final one here is the tri-sector coalitions. This is where between these agencies like government, financial institutions, and civil society, it has been observed that in some countries, when these groups form multi-sector working groups, it's much easier for them to make changes and much easier for them to get off the gray list. For instance, Mauritius is the country I think that has been on the gray list for the shortest time in Africa. They were only on the gray list for 1.5 years, where, for instance, Kenya, that was in the gray list in 2011, took 3 years to be removed from that same gray list, and most countries take about 2 to 4 years. So having a working group that is multi-sectoral and includes government and civil society is really important to respond to this challenge from a policy perspective, particularly. On capacity building and resilience, we need to think about our own institutions, strengthening them, making sure they're not at risk. Usually when I call for risk-based approach, I think what some organizations hear is that I am saying that NPOs are not at risk. That's not the case. This is something that's consistently evolving. Terrorists are finding ways consistently to also achieve their own mission. So it's up to us to be vigilant to these evolving changes. It's not enough to assume that we are not at risk. Yes, do a risk assessment, but also strengthen your institution. It's prevention rather than cure type of situation. Other than that, it's important to improve due diligence, making sure for instance, how many of the organizations here scrutinize their donors? How many check on their donors and who's sending them money? I'm not lifting my hand because I'm lying, you know? We don't, but this is something that we need to start doing because we are going to be under more scrutiny for this, especially where some donors are not trusted and can also face attacks from the government. Other than that, we need to think about financial inclusion, particularly in partnership with banks and thinking about how to ensure that funds get to the right places. This is important particularly for actors working on delivering humanitarian aid, where they are struggling with not having trusted sources. They are not having options of sending money because of the scrutiny and regulations that they're under. Dealing with cash is usually a massive problem where it's necessary in some places, even mobile money payments not considered safe. So we need to technologically think about what solutions we can have in order to create change there, and also to diversify our funding just to ensure that we are acting in a safe way. So what do we do now? What's our immediate call? How do we start working on this? First, we need to think about joint advocacy efforts. We need to work together. This is really the reason why we formed a working group, is that we saw the task of individual organizations in trying to respond to this problem. It's really difficult. It requires the partnership. It requires a very inclusive response. It requires better ideas. So that's very important for us to think about. And we need to explore more partnership opportunities, dialogue forums, more research and documentation. Again, this is a problem as of evidence, where we don't have evidence to act, but we're still acting. We're still putting in place laws, policies and measures without the evidence. So we need that evidence. And one of the ways I would propose to try and respond to this is to think about the Kenya NPO Working Group on the Financial Action Task Force and how we might be able to solve the problem. The way we work as the NPO Working Group is through these three goals. First, to think about enhancing understanding. So this includes one of the perspectives where we'd like to make sure that more and more people are having conversations about this and understanding what to do. Other than that is to try and safeguard our environment. So push for more risk-based practices and amplify the role of NPO voices in this. And finally, working on evidence-based policy approaches. This will be really important. We need to drive policies through evidence. Again, one of the reasons why civil society continues to suffer in this regard is that we are not part of the conversation. We keep coming after. You know, they make the policies, we come to challenge. So of course we seem as though we are never happy or we are always fighting them. We were never part of the process, so we don't feel included. So it's important for us to try and get included, including through building our technical capacity to contribute to these policy processes that I mentioned. If anyone would like to talk more about the NPO working group, I'll be happy to speak about this later. But I hope what we get from this conversation is that very much together we can ensure that security measures enhance rather than constrain our shared mission to protect human rights and to build just societies. Thanks a lot.
Asante. Brian Kimari, a round of applause for him again. Thank you so much, thank you. So we are again getting our final panel of the day, ladies and gentlemen. With your permission, allow me to call on to the stage Oliver Baka. Bormawor is a Ghanaian lawyer and an activist, an academic known for his role as a co-founder and lead convener of the Fix the Country movement, a social and political activism group in Ghana advocating for government accountability and systematic reform. Welcome, Karibu. A round of applause for him. He will be joined by Jimmy Maligeni from the Alliance of Community Action from Zambia. Welcome, Jimmy. Also present is Catherine Boy, Article 19. Catherine, by show of hand. Yes. Let's also appreciate her. We'll also be joined by Yusuf Abubakar, the Executive Director, Haki Africa. You have been here on the podium, but you will be on the seat now. And also the presence of Fayel Shafeddin, Gender MENA Program Manager from Tunisia. Welcome. So this will center around regulations of NGOs in Africa, balancing between national security concerns and the protection of human rights, and also the counterterrorism financing and the threats this poses to human rights. So,
kujaribu kulipa hiyo 75% now. Wamesema what they need now is your account details na invoice.
You will share that.
Okay, sawa. Pole. I was meant to call you.
Right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen.
Aye, thanks.
So I'll take your first brief remarks, then we get to the plenary. And I'll begin with you. Yes, on the far right. Okay, let me just sort this out.
Yes,
or you can use the handheld microphone here. Okay, I think that's better.
Thank you.
Basically on the two areas that were presented here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Catherine, as mentioned. Just to clarify, Article 19 is based on the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and the ICCPR on freedom of expression. And we are very present in this conversation when we're looking at balancing between national security and human rights. And I'll pick up from where our first panel speaker, Mr. Hussein, mentioned the hammer, and it reminded me of a quote that, I'm trying to remember the person, but the quote that says, when all you have is a hammer, you tend to see everything as a nail. And that is meant to be the situation we have in Kenya and reflected in a lot of our African countries. We have laws that were passed on from a colonial basis or even dictatorial leaderships. So there has been little to no effort to think of alternative options. Some of our leaders in office, including Kenya, were once opposition leaders, were once rebels, were once on the other side of what were called terrorists themselves in some context. So instead of considering and moving forward and into options that are alternatives, that are progressive, that reflect the situation we have in our region, we tend to apply the same laws, policies, practices, and culture. So what exactly are we, so my first question would be, my consideration would be, what exactly are we trying to solve? My example would go back to the Public Order Acts we have in Eastern Africa and maybe in some other countries. The laws that should promote and protect freedom of assembly and association are being applied negatively. One, the laws are negative in place, but they are also applied in the worst case scenario. Next, there's the idea of how do we recognize the issue? If I write the letter 9, for you it will appear as the letter 6. So there's cognitive bias in what I think the problem is. So are we creating opportunities and situations where we dialogue, where we relate? As a millennial, and that's something we really need to consider, my understanding of Kenyan problems is different from my predecessors, who would call Gen Y and baby boomers, and it's very different from the youth or the Gen Z we see. So how open am I to see the perspective and the perception of different things? Because Kenya belongs to me as much as it belongs to the next person. And lastly is, how flexible are we in our solutions? Are we open to discussion, or are we going to stick to the same systems? As civil society, we've had policies, practices, trainings, projects, and even pilots. But how flexible are we to adjust so that we actually balance the interest across the board?
Yeah.
Thank
Okay. Oliver Baka Varmawor, yes, your insights into that?
Thank you, and I'm happy to be part of a conversation that is stretching or perhaps bringing together different parts of the continent. The 3 quick points I want to make before we go into the main general discussion. The first one is a framing issue. So the truth is that the vast majority of illicit financial flows, whether they are terrorism facing or not, run primarily through incorporated bodies or depersonalized or abstract bodies. So it can be a profit-making organization or a non-profit organization. All you need is that you need a bank account, for instance, which is not registered in an individual's name. So if you frame it more broadly, then it's a corporate tool or mechanism that is allowing finances to flow more generally. It's not an NPO problem. It's a depersonalized mechanism of financial flow problem. Now, if you view it from that perspective, the tools and the ways in which we frame the issue can allow us to create a bit of distancing from how we begin to frame NPOs as a problem when it comes to this issue in a more global world. The second thing is also about the structural commitment to democracy itself from government. That in many of our countries, we have democracies without democrats. So there's not an inherent buy-in into the principles of fairness in terms of how the public space is governed, in terms of those who are entitled to push back on the state, and for which reason, when these things come up, like you said, it becomes like a cudgel, which we must blunt every form of opposition and criticism and portray it as if, well, we're just doing regular law enforcement. Whereas we know that the state has never sought to regulate the NPO space to better enable them to criticize them, right? The third point is also structure. The truth is that the vast majority of financing of the African civil space is subsidized by foreign taxpayers, meaning that the vast majority of the money we receive are not coming from African donors, are coming from non-African donors. And that's something that challenges the fundamental idea of the state itself. Because democratic commitment means that the mechanisms for which we hold our politics accountable and how we resource the mechanisms for holding our politics accountable must be financed primarily by citizens or the civil society that exists on the continent itself. Okay. So the lopsided nature of the financing also creates an inherent problem, which has probably created this appetite for how the state is willing to use its power in this many ways. And that's something that we need to reflect on. In many societies, I've heard talk about constitutional reforms that target political party financing, but in our countries, political parties tend to be the most financed, the most organized groups. In fact, from villages to every corner of our societies, they have cells, they have organized blocks, they have all this. But civil society doesn't have that level of organization. And yet we are thinking about further resourcing the most organized elements of our society, whereas we should be thinking about how we better resource civil societies. And then I think the final point perhaps one could make in terms of how we even think about how we regulate in it in the first instance. I'll give you an example. I'm involved primarily in the social movement in Ghana. And one of the things that we're thinking about how we finance our activities and do things like that, we look at the Nigerian example. The first thing the Nigerian state did with NSAS was that all donations that they had received, they went first and placed their hand on it that we're investigating it for money laundering and terrorism finance. For us then, it became that, okay, how do we use mechanisms that put whatever financing that we raise away from the state, the regulatory reach of the state? And so we must think about mechanisms that obscure our financing because it is inherently linked to our ability to survive. But yet, of course, that creates other risks that we can identify in this conversation. But for the most time, we are trying to run away from the state itself. And that's the problem. So how do we subject ourselves to the regulation of the principal person that we are fighting all the time? How do we trust it as a partner that is committed to regulating a space for the better of the civil space?
Okay.
Preliminary.
Yes, Yusuf.
Thank you. Mine is just to give historical perspective as to why these regulations, NGO regulations, counterterrorism financing. If you remember, if you recall, we've been talking about democracy and elections. And historically, states that have been elected before, once they acquire power, it has been very difficult to remove them democratically. So people devised ways of dealing with undemocratic states. So they used NGOs, they used illegal fundraising to ensure that they remove the despotic states. And this is why states came up with the regulations of NGOs and, you know, dealing with counterterrorism financing or money laundering. The objective on the outset is good because it is to ensure there is legitimate change, legitimate regime change through elections. That is the primary objective. But states have been abusing the regulations to target NGOs or to target entities that advocate for regime change within the context of a democratic society, which is not in tandem with what the governments require. So we must understand this, the history behind these regulations. The objective is okay, but the problem is that states now abuse these laws to take advantage of remaining in power. So as human rights organizations, we have to balance and we have to ensure that these regulations are not abused anymore. Thank you.
Yes, Jimmy.
Thank you. So I want to begin by sharing the Zambian context in terms of where we are with regards to the regulation of NGOs in terms of registration, but as well as the state claiming that they are capping on illicit financial flows. So right now, as we speak, Zambia implements what we know as the 2009 NGO Act. And there's an active bill before Parliament to which my organization even submitted before the Parliamentary Committee, where the state now is seeking to include illicit financial flow, illicit financial flow mechanisms within the legal framework. Our argument is that that is a duplication of existing laws because Zambia does already have a law called the Financial Intelligence Center. And our argument has been that the only thing that the state needs to do if they are so concerned about the sources of our financing is to simply include NGOs to what they call reporting entities in the FIC Act, whereby they would make it obligatory for us to meet certain financial reporting mechanisms. One of the things that we've noted in dealing with our government is that as much as we as civil society are learning from the Abubakars and their Hakis and Muhuris, our governments are also learning from your governments here in East Africa. So yesterday somebody said that when the elephants fight, the grass suffers. But I want to say that even when they make love, the grass still suffers. And so right now, when we went to State House, I apologize about that, but when we met with our president, he referred to your president here in Kenya as one of those that is regretting the extent to which your civic space is liberal, the extent to which you are open, the extent to which Kenyans can wake up one morning and decide that they're going to protest in 3 days' time.
And going to parliament.
and they're going to do that. In fact, he invited us to State House on that particular occasion because we had notified the police that we were going to protest against the government's intention to pass the Cybersecurity Act as well as the Cyber Crimes Act. In terms of the laws themselves, we are required to register with the Registrar of Societies, who is under the Ministry of Home Affairs, but we report to the Ministry of Social Welfare. So it's a very fragmented legal structure as things stand in Zambia. The registrar answers to the Minister of Social Welfare, whereas we are essentially reporting and filing our returns to the Ministry of Home Affairs and Internal Security. So you can see the extent to which the legal framework is fragmented. What has happened over time is that people are now preferring to register NGOs using the Companies Act, because in Zambia you can register as an NGO, as a society, or you can register it as a company limited by guarantee. And so you've got...
The first impression is when he was established and adopted was for stopping the terrorism vague in Tunisia in this period, especially where the organization under the Muslim brother at this time. But after 2021, and for who don't know that in Tunisia, the 25th of July 2021, coup d'etat happened from the president, the current president of the republic. So after this date, everything changed 100%. Everything changed. And this law come to be implemented on the organization, on the activists also, individual activists, and on the lawyer and judges who are against the regime. So our law is very vague. We couldn't really know the definition exactly, what the meaning of finance terrorism, what the meaning of terrorism on itself, what we can call terrorism. This law instaure what we call Commission Tunisienne, CTAF, Commission Tunisienne contre le terrorisme, or in English, Tunisian Commission Finance Counter-Terrorism Tunisian Commission, who is based in the central bank. And this commission has as role to control every dollar, every dinars, every euros come for civil society activists and opposition person. And when we come to the application, we found that two big things. The first one, that now the parliament want to change the decree law who organize the organization and association in Tunisia. They want to amend another law based on the counter-terrorism law. And the first argument are that civil society and organization gets money from party that we don't know, or government don't know it, and we need to block this. This is not true, right? But that's the argument. And the second point, the huge number of arrestation for civil society person or civil society activist under this law, and I couldn't. I just want to give an example of the former judge and lawyer Ahmed Swayeb who was arrested under this law, under terrorism and money laundering law, when he was advocated in the court for the opposition political or the opposition political person. So this law coming to shrink for us now in 2025, shrink the civic space of civil society and of Tunisian women defenders also, because sometimes we receive, individuals receive money from foreign country as, for example, for urgent funds, or to give it to the movement, because the movement are not regulated by the Tunisian law. So these details come a point that we can arrest people under the terrorism and laundering, counter-terrorism and laundering law in Tunisia.
Okay, thank you. The plenary, as they take a breather, anyone? Financing the line, okay. You have been silent. I deliberately was planning to pick up on you. Any other? Okay, you can proceed. Comment, observation? Yeah, use that gadget. Vuta mbele kidogo. Yeah, so that you're comfortable. Yeah, you can name organization. Your name, organization.
Yes. James Mbugwa, the Data Privacy and Governance Society of Kenya. So the first question I wanted to ask, and I think also Kimari should also answer to this. I was curious, what was the reason we were, NGOs or NPOs were removed from the reporting entities list? Is it that there was very little activity to be reported, or it just wasn't worth the while? Then also, I'll ask the gentleman from Zambia, what exactly are your views with regard, I got you to be suggesting that you be included as a reporting entity under the, is it under the NGO bill or under the cybersecurity? Yeah, under the cybersecurity bill. Yeah, because one of the other things I usually have a problem with, even with our own law, the POCAMLA law, with the issue of reporting, is that when you're reporting the financial reporting center here, the bank, if it's reporting a suspicious transaction or suspicious activity, it is not required to inform the client on who it is reporting. Yeah? And then when you think about the fact that, almost every other area, when your personal information is being shared, even legally for legal purposes, there is need for a court order. And I don't know what even the other gentlemen and lady on the panel, and the ladies on the panel, sorry, think when it comes to that issue of reporting entities, and whether it can actually be used to spy on people, because when you have an entity that can just receive information without getting a court order, then it is really able to probably look into whoever you are dealing with as a civil society organization. So what would be your thoughts around the use, keeping in mind our theme that we are talking about, the use of security reasons to sort of eat into the rights of the people?
So the first question is to Brian. Brian, who made the presentation?
Yes,
and then and Jimmy from Zambia, and any other person who wants to comment. Yes, so they have noted down the question. Brian, you respond first, I'll come to you, sir. Okay. Yes, Brian. Your mic is off.
Yeah. So we were removed from the list because we weren't meant to be there originally. So this is something that is now more reflective of the risk-based approach. This is usually a list for, they're called DNFIs, or designated non-financial institutions. So it usually is of institutions that are of specifically of high risk, like real estate industries and casino. So our placement on that list of reporting entities was already not a good idea. So following certain steps being made in place, including the recommendations from the Financial Action Task Force, then we were removed from the list, because the FATF actually questioned why we are on the list and clarified that that is not what recommendation 8 called for. So it's a product of also the mutual evaluation review that the FATF conducted here. Thank you.
Yes, Jimmy?
Sure. So what I was saying was that the submission or the consensus among NGOs in Zambia is that we would rather the government, not that it's the best thing, just added us to reporting entities for several reasons. The first is that we are already scrutinized anyway. So when you receive any foreign funding in Zambia, while the bank does not disclose to you that the money you've received has been flagged, you know because the bank requires you to identify the source of the funds and the reason for your receipt of funds. So there's a form they give you to fill out. And at that point, you know that they are fulfilling their reporting entity requirement. As to the industries that are already on the list, it is real estate, law firms, insurance, and banks. However, what we are now faced with as NGOs is that while we are already subjected to this scrutiny, the bill that they are proposing to pass now includes an element where when we receive money, before it can be accredited to our accounts, the Minister of Community Development must approve our receipt of funds. Now that will become a second layer on what is already existing. So what we're saying to the government is you are duplicating all these fences that you've already created. You're just adding more traps. Why can't this particular act just defer to what you're already practicing anyway? So move away from the idea of having an individual deciding whether we receive the money or not. The banking mechanism is not the best, but for now it works. Because once you say it's from the EU, here is our project proposal, it's from GIZ, here is our project proposal, this is where we are going to be working, we'll be collaborating with that ministry, it's easy. But if all of that power is now going to be vested in an individual, then it is going to become even more stifling for civic space.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the gentleman in the black shirt.
Thank you. My name is Mulei Takapatso from Grassroots Solidarity Advocates, Zambia. My first comment is that there is potential that this particular legislation aimed at regulating non-government organizations around terrorist financing and fraud could be used to seize the activities of NGOs or civic actors in a particular country. And we have seen this, I've seen this happen in other countries where I've gone to observe elections, where the civil society organizations that you are talking to as a Commonwealth Observer Group tell you that they have not been able to do any of the activities they usually do during the electoral period because they are being investigated. And as a result, their accounts have been frozen and pending investigation. And from their own understanding of how the process works, just after the election, when the new government comes in, then all of a sudden they say, okay, well, I've investigated you and it's okay. So during that particular time, your activities are suspended. So the question then to anyone that will be ready to pick it up just to give their views is, how do we safeguard the activities of the organization under such kind of frameworks from being tampered with under the gaze of national security or protecting our own countries from terrorist financing? How do we navigate around that and put safeguards?
Yes, Oliver, and then you can respond to that as well. Catherine?
Yeah, I think...
all right, so you have expressed interest as well. Please proceed.
I will give you the examples given by Kimari, Muhuri, and ourselves, Haki Africa, because our finances were, our accounts were frozen, and we were accused of having financed Al-Shabaab in attacking Garissa University.
So for context, Al-Shabaab is a militant organization based in Somalia and which has been carrying out a wave of avengement attacks since Kenya deployed its military in 2011, and which is prescribed as a terrorist organization in Kenya, and which had killed students at the time in 2015, the 2nd of April 2015, yeah, 147 students in Garissa. Yeah, proceed.
So the two organizations were accused of financing terrorism. So we went to court to challenge the freezing of our accounts. And what helped us is that according to the regulations, some sort of certain actions. Number one, they could not come up with a list showing that either Muhuri or Haki Africa were actually reported, investigated, and placed in that list So there was no evidence whatsoever, and that helped us because I'm answering your question on safeguarding. And number two, what helped us is auditing. We had very well audited our reports. Our finances could be traced to donors, credible donors. Our activities could be verified, and there was nothing in court to justify the freezing. So as a lesson to other organizations is that you keep your financial record properly, have them audited properly. Sometimes it is not bad to disclose what you're doing as an organization, because that will help you. So that is just answering on the safeguards we take to ensure that we don't fall prey to the abuse of these regulations by state institutions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll pick up on your last point as well. But before that, you remember when I was making my first initial comment, I talked about the framing problem, and that if we think about the issue more in terms of incorporated entities that allow us vehicles for moving money, it would be completely inconceivable that the Minister for Finance would propose that any money that goes through the banking system that goes to any company, the Minister of Finance has to approve before it's released to any corporate entity in any country. It will collapse the economy. So for it to be even a suggestion or something that we can even contemplate, that the activities of civil bodies or NPOs has to be able to, or the finances to be released to them, a minister has to be approving this, for me, flies against anything I understand. Now, if we generalize it, then say that all entities, not only NPOs, can become vehicles, then the question of the auditing mechanism becomes the only way. Because in terms of the profit-making organizations, you have to file your financial statements with Register of Companies or any of them. Then that becomes the mechanism that deals with everybody else. Then when we meet in these rooms, we'll be talking about how do we reinforce capacity to better audit, to better be able to prepare financial statements, to continue to be able to meet those regulatory needs, without them being seen as a particular category that needs to be dealt with a special kind of regulation, when we know that we're in a space where we are more vulnerable to the state trying to block critical financing that aids our work more than anything. So I am more interested in a mechanism that does not distinguish NPOs from how profit-making organizations work. We all need to be treated in the same way and understood that our work, if blocked in any particular way, would affect the critical functioning, if not of the economy, but not of the financial economy, but maybe of the governance economy. You know.
Yes, Catherine.
I'll start with the question from our colleague from Data Center. When you're balancing between how do you make sure the information we share in our compliance, in our reporting, is not used against you. In an ideal world, we should have better data protection laws. I don't know about other regions, but in Kenya there is a law. It's not perfect, we've raised concern, but the principle of data protection is that you know who is handling your data, you know for how long, you know what access, and they need consent before sharing it. So that should be the general principle and practice. It does not happen in Kenya especially. So the next step would be what oversight mechanisms are there over the information we share and the institutions in government that hold that information. And especially, so there's a part of the regulators that have our information when we are doing reporting, but there's also the part of the security agency. In Kenya, we have in law, the National Intelligence Service Complaints Board. It is existing, but it is not acting, or it's not moving. There's a team there that is being paid salaries every month, but there's not implementation and support. This should be an office that, where as an individual, as a civil society, as a grassroots member, I should raise concerns when I think my data is being used against me, and I should know how exactly are they meant to respond. What is their powers? What is their opportunities for responding? The last option for me as a civilian would be the judicial process. How can I approach the same way Haki Africa went to court? How do I show my case, and how do I expect the government to respond to how my data was used either by the regulators or by the security agents? That is a very tall order, but it is not impossible. And I believe when all fails at the state level, we have to build on solidarity as civil society actors. If I know Haki Africa as a partner, I know Haki Africa as conveners of XYZ platform or network. So when a concern is raised by my partners, how ready are we as civil society actors to stand with each other? Because at the end of the day, our constitution says we the people. So we are stronger and we are better together. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Fael, you want to respond? Just hang on.
Yeah, I'd just like to respond to Mleta on his question regarding how we propose to protect funds from arbitrary freezing. Our submission before Parliament, we proposed that the first thing is to remove the so-called ministerial oversight. It is a huge risk to have one individual supervising, and as the professor has ably explained here, we cannot do that for everyone. Secondly is to set up clear guidelines that are enforced by a board, and a board that is not appointed by the minister, but a board that is appointed by professional bodies. So in our context, we'd go to the accountants body, which is the ZICA, Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants. You ask them to nominate a member. You go to the Law Association of Zambia, you ask them to nominate a member. You go to the Zambia Association of Employers, Zambia Engineering Institute. All these professional bodies should come together and form this board. And then this board should be answerable to Parliament, not to the minister. And then finally, we also proposed that the reporting mechanisms that are in the bill should be tiered. Right now, it requires that all NGOs do statutory audits. But our submission was that there should be levels of funding that should be exempt, where a simple financial report should suffice. Because as you'd know, Mleta, statutory audits are very expensive in Zambia. So that would kill social movements, for example. So our proposal was that if you receive a certain amount of money, maybe say $10,000 and above, then you need a social statutory audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Fael.
Yes, I want just to answer the last question. I think that there is no magic receipt. It depends. It depends of two things. It depends of the political context and the legal framework of the country. If you still, as civil society, have space to advocate and to change things, go for this. If everything is closed and everything is blocked, I think that we have another alternative depending on the legal framework. We can, for example, open an organization as a society, as my brother said, for example. If the legal framework doesn't work like this, we can open outside of the country, remove, or let's say switch whole the administration and finance things outside of the country and work on the ground inside of the country. It really depends. It depends of waves of oppression. It depends of legal framework, and it depends of the political context.
Yes, Matthias. Matthias, I'll come to you, Hilda. Yes, Matthias.
Thank you very much. Let me first of all appreciate.
You sound like you haven't eaten lunch. I can attest you are together. You had lunch.
It could be because of the...
Yes. And he's one of my crew of dancers, made up by also Francis Auma. Yeah, most obliged, sir. Okay, proceed.
Thank you very much. I was saying, let me first of all appreciate the presentation by Kimari. And my question will also be to him, because we haven't seen that really the report as to why Kenya is still on the, Kenya was kept on the grey list. And I think the laws are there in this country, but sometimes the implementation is actually subjective to a particular group of people. Why I'm saying that is that I'm yet to hear from him, but I'm 100% sure that why we are on the grey list could be because of the state institutions, because of the illicit transactions that are happening between, for instance, Kenya and DRC, or let's say gold scams and money being money being brought to this country to go to war and all that. And you'd see how much of a scrutiny it would be the way the government really scrutinizes how money comes to NGOs. To an extent, when Haki Africa's accounts were frozen, you'd know that the systems are working, but only subjective to a particular group of people. Why I'm saying that is I feel that there's a friend of mine who had an NGO, who registered an NGO and was very lucky to do a proposal.
When he did that proposal, money came to his account, let's say 100 million, and it was the first time that he was receiving that kind of money. But the level of harassment that he received, immediately the money reached his account. The next day, police officers were in his house, and they were asking him how that money came and what's the purpose of the money. He was actually taken to the police, to where the department in charge of that investigation was, and they were asking a lot of questions regarding the money that came. But when it comes to government itself, because we know there are politicians, we know that there are leaders in this country who are also engaging in this. So there's a double speak when it comes to that. So my question would be to Kimari, in what sense is it to the fact that we are in the grey list? Who is the major contribution? Who has the major contribution? Is it the NGO or is it state institutions? Because I'm pretty sure this could be state institutions that led us to be in the grey list. Thank you.
Yes, Brian, you're noting that down? Hilda, you'll respond once we get the other question.
Good afternoon once again.
Good afternoon to you too.
Thank you very much, Brian, for your presentation, and to the panelists, thank you very much for your presentation. I will not respond for Brian, but I'll interest participants to always check out on the FATF website for our country's report. So usually there's a summary about our countries where we're in a position where we are. We're either called the 40 recommendations of FATF, so we're either non-compliant with a particular recommendation, partially compliant, or compliant. So it would be in our best interest for all of us to check out for our countries. So looking at this particular session of counterterrorism measures and human rights, I just wanted to, Uganda is one of the countries that has suffered this law. And I wanted to just list the key impact of these laws and what the ripple effect it has on both the CSOs and the beneficiaries. Because most of our CSOs, all our CSOs are promoting and advancing human rights. And some of them have been mentioned. But when you look at, we have what we call intelligence fishing and scrapping. My brother from Zambia mentioned that they would prefer being on the list of accountable persons because either way they're being surveilled. The fact of the matter is, all countries watch out for the finances coming in and out of the country, the movement of finances. It is FATF requirement. And usually, recommendation 29 that recommends that countries set up national financial intelligence units requires them to be autonomous and not state captured. But most of our national financial intelligence units are state captured. They receive all the information, the intelligence information, how the money moves about, and it's up to them to fabricate criminal cases or charges on NGOs that they're biased about. And in my country, the NGOs that are usually at risk of this are NGOs that speak truth to power, NGOs that promote human rights, governance, and democracy. And we've seen it in scenarios. During elections, the past elections, 2 NGOs, their accounts were frozen. The Uganda Women Network and then the NGO Forum, because of an umbrella and loose coalition that was formed that was called the New You, and it was politicized to people power. So that alone, the government said they are promoting terrorism and they're doing money laundering. So they froze the accounts. Now, what is the ripple effect of that? When you talk about bank freezing, and we've spoken about it, and it's something that sometimes is done deliberately, but also FATF recommendation requires it. The states are being given that authority to freeze the bank accounts on suspect that the money is facilitating money laundering or terrorism financing. So they have the authority. But just like most of you are aware, all these recommendations are very bound to being abused by the states. So when they close those accounts, what is the ripple effect? Human rights beneficiaries. It means the beneficiaries are not going to receive their services because there is no timeline to it. It means the staff in that organization, the salaries are off. So what happens to the livelihood in their families? It means that some of them will face stigma. When we approach some of the organizations that have gone through this, and stigma from the donors, one, some donors recall their funding. That is their primary objective. They recall their funding, immediately that is put out. And then, two, some of these people, because it's out there, they get stigma from their family members and their friends. No one wants to associate with them. And that has an effect on their psychosocial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Halim, I'll come to Halima. Let Brian respond to. It's still on for Brian, so he takes two. Please proceed, yeah. Thank you. You had lunch?
Yes.
You came in late. I must be worried for my sister.
Yes, I did.
Yes, proceed.
Okay. My question basically is, how do we tone down the double reporting that we have today in Kenya, where we report before 30th or 31st of March, that is to the PBO authority, and then we also have reporting in terms of under the Porter Act, that is Prevention and Counter-Violence Extremism Act, where we have to report in the kind of work that we do, and also submit our 2-year financial audit before you get accredited to implement the PCVE activities. So to me, how can we tone that down, Brian, to ensure that at least we do only one reporting rather than two double reporting? At the same time, how can we evaluate these policies so that they can be friendly to the CSOs and workable for us in this field? Thank you.
Yes, Brian. Brian, you can respond to those questions?
Good, thank
Yes,
you.
please.
Yes, I have. So the first question on why Kenya is on the grey list. So it's numerous deficiencies in the system. So largely that the framework is not sufficient to deal with these threats of money laundering and that. So, and also the fact that we haven't had successful prosecutions in this area. So in fact, the challenge, what it has to do with NPOs and the grey list is the failure to have a risk-based approach. So one of the reasons we're on the grey list is that they're not treating NPOs with the proportionate response that's required of them. So the other reasons are largely failure to prosecute these things, and you're absolutely right by thinking this is largely a problem of state institutions and what we call politically exposed persons. And one of the reasons we will be great is that even again is failure to address that specific part. If we don't have successful, at least initiate prosecutions on these issues, then we won't get off the grey list, and we will be added again even if we manage to get off this time. As we were also on the grey list between 2011 and 2014, and 10 years later we added back into it. Okay, yeah. And next on the double reporting, that's a really good question, and one that I hope Director Yusuf will also respond to, because Haki Africa had this exact question and tried to challenge this in court. They went to a petition, challenged the NCTC basically becoming a reporting and accreditation center, but unfortunately the judge agreed with the state. And this is something that I think is a problem, because first of all, it does add a secondary regime that we have to require and be regulated under. And this is something that we need to think about how to respond to and how to work at a policy perspective to influence change in this. Because as you're absolutely right that it's a double reporting structure, and beyond, so let's think beyond legal mechanisms or using legal mechanisms and others, how can we address this issue? And I think we have to start by thinking about the policy advocacy that we need to do in this area, how we need to push for the law to change. Even as Kenya is currently on the grey list, it's usually quite a small window, as I said, around 2 to 4 years and sometimes sooner. So this is the time to act and try to respond to that. And, I think that's the best we can do to try and find a solution. Did I miss that question? I did. Yeah, what's the last one?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yes, let me take I'll come to you. Yeah. Yes, please.
My name is Marion, the activist. My question is to Kimari, and I want to briefly ask. Recently, there have been malicious prosecution on our Gen Zs. They've been profiled and called terrorists and even charged in a court of law, awaiting justice to prevail. Do you think that profiling could take us to be blacklisted as a red zone. Do you think that is risky for our country and for of our beautiful name? Thank you. I rest my case.
Yeah, the wholesale use of anti-terror laws to charge young Kenyans who are even unable to pay their police bonds in courts of law. Once you respond to that, then I come to the panel. Yes, please, Brian. Seems everything is being sent your way. The barrage is coming your way, but fine.
Good, I was prepared. Okay, yeah, so Kenyans being charged with that. That's another threat. One thing I should mention is that this is not the first time we're seeing this. When these protests started in 2023, we saw the first person being charged with terrorism, the first activist. I forget his name is Shadrach something, Jakababa, alias Jakababa, is one of the protesters from ODM. And the problem with this is the inaction from also us. The lack of solidarity in responding to some of these issues means that we keep constantly being a threat. And you are right about the kind of damage that we'll have to our reputation as a country. I'm not sure the implications, particularly on the grey list and the Financial Action Task Force, because that's usually very specific on terror financing. But largely at an international level, we do risk a lot of damage to the reputation of the country. And I think the way to start thinking about how to respond to this, seeing just the complex nature that these threats are weaved, is to have a very holistic response that is both tries to look at protection, tries to look at also how to expand the space and ensure we are working more sustainably, and really trying to focus on a more sustainable approach where we are working to influence governance in this area of terrorism. Let's not classify terrorism as something that's just a security issue. It's a governance problem, and one that needs also our expertise, our contribution in order to address it. And it would be imperative for us to start by looking at how we can ensure the way that these issues are responded to is more risk-based. Luckily, I think the 36 people who were initially accused of terrorism, those charges were dropped. So I'm hoping that does not become the norm.
Thank you. Jimmy, and then Catherine, all of you.
Okay, yes. Quickly to respond to Hilda. I think
so. We keep it short so that we are more engaged.
Yes, sure. So in Zambia, I think the FIC is one of the strongest oversight institutions. I'm not sure there's any organization that would refuse their oversight. In fact, I see Brian nodding there. They've been a pen in the side of every government. So you are safe if you are being overseen by FIC. I think that's the context. But also the act that regulates their operations is extremely solid. So I think in that regard, we are happy to be answerable to FIC. And then, of course, their reports have consistently shown that our biggest risk is lawyers. So lawyers are the biggest facilitators of illicit financial flows in Zambia. Fellow councils are not happy, but that's the fact. Then followed by real estate, and then followed by insurance. NGOs are not even in the picture. They're not even mentioned at all. Thank you.
Let me touch on two things. Number one, the question by Marion. Let me be the devil's advocate. You must understand the thinking behind government. Why we are being charged with terrorism-related charges is the fact that our protests were directed at Parliament. They were directed at State House. The government is thinking that the intention of the protesters was regime change, illegitimate regime change. And if you look at the definition of terrorism under the Prevention of Terrorism Act, that falls under the definition of terrorism. Illegal change of government is the intention of terrorists. So that is the thinking behind government, that you want, and you know, the expression, Ruto must go. If you listened to what the government was saying is that there is a process. We have to wait until 2027. If you're saying Ruto must go before 2027, is that you want to employ illegitimate means of removing Ruto from power. So you are actually, you know, eligible to be charged with terrorism. So that is the thinking behind government. I'm not saying I'm supporting that. I don't know if that is whether that is correct, but I want you to understand the thinking behind government. And as Halima, why we have to report to NCTC, there is a historical perspective behind that. At one particular time, organizations like Haki Africa and Muhuri, suspected terrorists used to call on our offices. We used to harbor these people. We used to talk to them and sometimes even present them to police. We present them to police. So the thinking was that certain NGOs, certain CSOs were aiding and abetting terror acts. So NCTC had to monitor the activities of these institutions or organizations. And this is why they amended the portal. And we went to court. The High Court disagreed with us. The matter is still pending in the Court of Appeal. We hope that will be reversed. Some of us have refused to report to NCTC, and I don't think we will report to NCTC. We are waiting for the actions they are going to take, but we believe there is no legal basis for us to report to NCTC. There are enough legal mechanisms for reporting, especially under those who are registered under PBO. There are some of us who could not be registered under the NGO Act. We were refused registration, so we had to register ourselves as a trust. So there is a legal regime that manages Haki Africa as a trust, but not under NCTC. So I just wanted you to understand the reasoning behind government as to why we should report to NCTC and as to why you are being charged with terrorism under the guise of dealing with protests.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick point, problematizing a bit, FATF as well, more generally, and think, because I think this practice of listing and grey listing and blacklisting also creates its own sub-economy of oppression. And, in many countries has become, of course, it leads to higher costs of doing business, economic conditions, and so governments become interested in scapegoating. And so if they can cure two problems with kill two birds with one stone, they lump up human rights defender groups and things like that. They report these basic statistics and look at all the actions we are taking, and for which reason you then see that, oh, in fact, they are being more compliant with what we have put in place. There have been questions, for instance, about FATF's recommendation 8, which is allowing targeting of human rights defenders across board. I think it is important that even inherent in the mechanism itself, the misuse of anti-money laundering legislation and terrorism financing legislation itself should be a marker that goes against the state. So that inherent within your own mechanisms, if a human rights defender or organization is targeted, you would issue a red notice, or you write to the specific government and say, we are concerned about the ways in which this is used in this particular way. In that way, your responsibility becomes 360. It's not only just checking a box and ensuring that states are moving from the black to gray list or delisting, but also you have taken on more increased responsibility about the inherent risks in particular countries about how it can be used. Also, there's also the question of regulatory overload. In all sincerity, the reason why, for instance, many African countries find themselves disproportionately on the list is because these are countries that are dealing with regulatory challenges across board. The financial muscle that it takes to be able to ensure compliance would not compare with the global north. And so if we put them all in the same system and structure and ask for the same reporting obligations, of course you are creating an incentive for them to be able to target, the low-hanging fruit and target activists, because you put them in a situation where you have not differentiated their responsibilities enough, and you have not been able to scale them enough to be able to meet the muscle of the state, and for which reason you can create an industry for targeting in order to fake compliance.
I'll answer on 2 questions. One on the profiling and protesters. The aspect we need to remember is that protesters, there's a slogan that started last year in Kenya that the fear is gone in Kenya. So bringing the idea of, because last year the charges, in 2024, the charges were unlawful assembly, the simplest of charges. And there was so much solidarity from the legal fraternity that any lawyer in any space could go to any court and any police station and just ask for people to be released. So there was a lot of solidarity. By the time you're bringing in terror charges, you're instilling a thought of fear that lawyers, but also human civilians are afraid. What exactly is going on? Why is this not, was this organic, or was it a mastermind of some political actors or even some people? The issue is not even the protesters per se. The issue is the solidarity that came from Kenyans, and Kenyans in diasporas was more scary. Last year we had Kenyans sending money for different things, for people arrested, for food for the protest, anything that the support to the young people was present. This year, even with the terror charges, a lot of money has come in from different actors, individuals, you and I, into other individuals, including lawyers, to support bail terms for terror charges. So there is money flowing with no real accountability. So that should be of concern and of interest to us. As of last week, it was 2-point-something million sent to lawyers, sent to individuals, not being channeled, let's say, to the Law Society of Kenya or to organizations that can be held accountable. So there's another aspect we need to remember. How is that money flowing across borders and into different actors in Kenya? On the aspect of how do we make the reporting systems and the reporting platforms relate to civil society? We can't do the court work, we can't do the policy work, but we have to create opportunities for dialogue. How do we interact with our regulators? How we inform? In different towns, in different cities, we are more, we can easily access the regulators, the government agencies, the services. But there are some of us at the grassroots level who have less information and less capacity. So we have an opportunity to connect the regulators and the civil society within our circles, within our coalitions. And that's one platform that the NPO working group has done. How do we talk to your regulators? How do they communicate what is needed, and do they have a chance? Instead of telling me to go to an office in the city to meet a particular officer, give us a platform that is open to all of us. Let us talk it out. Let us ask the basic questions so that as I do a follow-up for my institution, I know exactly where the challenge is.
Thank you. Dancer 001 from County 001. Auma.
Thank you very much. I'm Francis Auma from Muhuri. I really appreciate Senior Counsel Zubakar. We have been in and out, thick and thin, through this issue of reporting to national counterterrorism. Your accounts have been closed down. Hussein is a good example. When we were in Africa, Salma. I can tell you for sure, it is not a good experience. Demand, condition, harassment, even some civil society also, they rejected us. They say, no, you are not part of us. These are friendly government NGOs. Even registration, the way Senior has been saying, it's not easy to register if you are doing a governance issue or real work, human rights issue. But if you are friendly, you can give report to the National Counterterrorism Center. Very good indeed. Anytime, within 2 seconds, you have been registered. Advocates also in Kenya, some say we cannot associate with these human rights organizations like Muhuri, Africa, and others who are seen are against the government or who are perceived to be against the government. So it's very difficult, even if you have a case in court, for advocate to come to support you. Only 2 or 3 who are known as really human rights advocates who can come. Even donors, even some donors. Yeah, they are your donor. But when you're in trouble, like the way we are in trouble, someone says, okay, wait a minute, clear your trouble first, and then we negotiate or we talk later. So it's a very bad experience, but still, we are real to the cause. That's why we are here, and that's why international people have joined us, and the struggle is on. Aluta continue. Comrade power!
Thank you. Because of time, yes, you'll respond to, just your closing remarks, but I will start with you for fairness. Yeah. But final, please. Yeah, yes.
Thanks. Yeah. Mukoya is my name. Let me just add something to the conversation about protests and POTA, the terrorism law. I was in a meeting, I happened to sit on NCAJ. NCAJ is the Council of Administration of Justice in Kenya. And the police were very clear that part of the reason why they chose terrorism terrorism laws is because it is not easy to get bond or bail when terrorism laws. So there's the aspect of can we hold you longer? The threshold of bond and bail, I think, is higher when you look at those laws. I think that's something that we need to think through. But that aspect is just the narrative itself. And you remember, everyone can remember, the Chief Justice was first of all briefed, especially when the Kikuyu police station was, and the court was raised down. And when she came out, her framing was, these were acts of terror. Yet this is the same court that we are supposed to go and defend people about. So I think the context of how do we develop a counter narrative, and somebody spoke about narrative in the morning, how does the civil society then collect intelligence then that helps us counter some of these narratives? Otherwise, whatever comes out in the mainstream media will actually be the game plan for the state and will fall victim to it.
Thank you. And also on a global scale, George Bush and Dick Cheney lied about the war in Iraq. So they ended up meeting terror on the very same people they went to liberate in Iraq, and they led to the birth of terrorism by ISIL. So context. Yes, Fayel, you're closing remarks.
I want just to say that all this can end if the statements, the government, the regime think that the civil society organizations are partners, neither their enemy, and that we have the same goals by the end as our countries become more democratic or less democratic and become more advancing. So I think that we should stop presenting that all organizations that have money outside the country are accused until they prove the inverse. And finally, I want just to say that between this balance between security and the human rights, I think that human rights should always win, because if everyone is secure, that means the state is secure. Thank you.
Jimmy.
Mine is to appeal to us to collaborate outside of this room or beyond this room. I think we do well to come together and have very important conversations like these ones, but it is what we do together and for each other once we leave the room. Thank you very much for having me.
Yusuf.
Thank you. I just want to remind my colleagues in the civil society that we are seen as agents of change. We want good governance. And it's not easy for a government to deal with agents of change. So we'll always be targeted. So what we should do is to ensure the oversight institutions like Kenya National Human Rights Commission, IPOA, judiciary, are independent enough to defend us when we face the wrath of the state. But we should not give up. We should continue with our good work to, agitate for positive change, not just in Kenya, but in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. It's strange to use my last remarks to disagree, but I'm sorry, that's what I'm going to do. There's a comment you had made earlier about sort of the decentralized mechanisms of money flow that was showing solidarity to protest and individuals like that. And if you're not careful, we're bringing that into the conversations around financing and terrorism financing. That's the very thing that weakens our ability to be able to respond to a shifting state that is continuing deploying violence and this kind of language against activists. I today now have spent, as somebody was telling me, apart from Kwame Nkrumah, I've spent more time in jail in Ghana now for protest-related offenses. And for all those protesters, but for the solidarity of our diaspora, individuals sending money into individual accounts to be able to ensure that food was brought to protesters, that legal aid was able to mobilize, we couldn't have been able to survive. In fact, many of the traditional civil society organizations, for fear of being anti-government, would rather stay away from those mechanisms. And I think that those are strengths rather than weaknesses. And we have to be able to think about, even as we think of regulating, how do we present the strength of decentralized mobilizing and financial flows, because those are critical for sustenance of the civil society space in Africa.
Yes, Catherine.
I'm so tempted to respond because we had an experience with our Defenders Coalition last year when they received money and they started being approached by the Kenya Revenue Authority, and it brought concerns. So them receiving money for last 2024 had an implication. So it's a thought that we need to really consider. On my last point, yes, as ICJ has mentioned, we have to change the narrative. What people see is not what is the reality, and we have to partner with our media fraternity. They are the ones who communicate. They are the ones on the ground. They are the ones in the local communities. We have to be united. We have to show solidarity. in the simplest of things, in the smallest of groups, we have to show solidarity. We have to build our capacity through dialogue with the regulator, with ourselves, with the local communities. We have to build on dialogue. And lastly, we have to see the situation as a human security concern. The reasons half of us are on the streets, half of us do what we do, is because our dignity has been compromised or violated. So how do we bring dignity back to ourselves as a people, as a community, so that even national security is not a concern? They said, the Ugandan colleague mentioned yesterday that the reason Ugandans do go to the street is because they have food on their plate, on their tables. So how do we make sure human security is synonymous to national security?
Thank you, Catherine. A round of applause for them. I think that is so mean of you. We can improve on that again. Nice. Thank you. Thank you, Fael. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Yusuf, Senior Counsel. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Catherine. So we'll now, because we are done for closing remarks, on behalf of Haki Africa, Board Member Konomore to make the closing remarks. Omore. So I proceed. Yes, representatives.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the representatives who are here for Northeast.
Will come to the stage. Representatives from the South, by a show of hand, or I can just speak on any. Yeah, Southern Africa, I mean, generally. Yeah, you can just speak from where you are. You can just use the microphone, yes. Yeah, your general closing remarks, yeah. All right, briefly.
First and foremost, thank you very much, Haki Africa, Director Abubakar and your team. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to come and be part of this very important conversation. Thank you to my fellow Zambian delegation members. I think that we have done the best that we can. We look forward to further collaboration with colleagues from Kenya, colleagues from Ghana, Nigeria, and hopefully beyond Tunisia as well. Thank you very much.
Northern Africa?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this space. Thank you for this conversation, very important and very deep. And thank you again for inviting North Africa. And just remember that North Africa are African countries. Thank you.
Eastern Africa, or because we are the hosts? Okay. Tanzania, Hilda? I mean Uganda, Hilda?
We are the host. The
Yes.
mere fact that it's East Africa, we are the host.
So Mr.
And
Maembe.
the African Cup is coming to,
Yes.
to East Africa.
Yeah.
By all means.
So
Thank you very much for this session. We discussed a lot and we have a lot to work on as civil society. And I hope for change. I'm optimistic. Thank you.
Bwana Maembe.
Nashukuru sana kupata fursa hii ya kuweza kuhudhuria katika mkutano huu, lakini pia tunawashukuru Haki Afrika kwa jitihada yao ya kuifanya Afrika na watu ambao hawana sauti ndani ya Afrika kufikiriwa na mawazo yao kuwakilishwa, hasa kwa kupitia hizi asasi za kijamii. Lakini pia nafikiri wito pia kwa viongozi wa nchi zetu za Afrika wasifikiri kwamba haya ni mapambano dhidi yao, bali huu ni mwanzo wa kuwasaidia kurahisisha kazi zao za utawala, lakini pia kuwafanya watu waishi kwa uhuru zaidi, hasa katika kipindi hichi ambacho tuna mgogoro kati ya haki za binadamu na mambo ya usalama. Asante sana.
Thank you. So, Fayal, for your advantage, I say, Fayal, so let me just do a summary of what he said. I appreciated that Haki Africa has organized this coming together and its importance in today's advancement of good governance, the place of civil society organization in our democracy, or organizations in our democracies, and as well the thanking of the membership that's present here going forward as how to strengthen the leadership across the continent. In summary, thank you. West Africa.
Thank you very much. For me, let me make it a bit longer here. So as we have come to the close of this all-important gathering, I rise up with a deep sense of gratitude, renewed conviction, and unwavering hope. Over the past days, we have journeyed together through a landscape of powerful testimonies, deep reflections, and passionate calls for justice. We have interrogated uncomfortable truths behind state-sanctioned abuses, scrutinized security laws that fail to protect the very people they claim to serve, and heard from voices too often excluded from national conversations: women, youth, persons with disability, grassroots defenders, and those on the margins of power. From these conversations, one truth rings loud and clear: Africa is ready. Yeah, we are ready to shift the paradigm from top-down militarized security frameworks to people-centered, rights-respecting governance. We are ready to reimagine security not as a tool for control, but as a commitment to dignity, inclusion, and shared responsibility. Let it be known from Nairobi to the rest of the continent: we have not gathered here in vain. This conference has not merely raised awareness, it has charted a path forward. Together, we have planted the seeds of a Pan-African movement grounded in solidarity, accountability, and the firm belief that security without rights is tyranny, and right without security is fragility. As we return to our countries, communities, and causes, I urge us not to leave this momentum behind in this room. Instead, let us carry it home with courage and clarity. Let us advocate louder, mobilize smarter, collaborate deeper, and stand firmer, especially when it is hardest to do so. Let the communique we have crafted become more than words on paper. Let it be a living document that shapes policy, informs laws, inspires activism, and guides future generations. Let our solidarity transcend borders. Let us resolve, defy repression, and let our unity be the force that finally reconciles the false dichotomy between national security and human rights. My friends, the future of Africa is not written in policy documents or political speeches. It is written by people like you and me who dare to imagine a continent where freedom is not feared but fiercely protected. Let us go forward not as victims of repression, but as architects of transformation. Let us put people at the center. Let us make right the foundation. And let us make justice the legacy. Thank you to Haki Africa, to the Open Society Foundation, and to every soul who made this moment happen. God bless you. God bless Africa.
Thank you. And the rapporteur will give us a summary in 5 minutes of the communique before I invite the board member Omore to give the final remarks on behalf of Haki Africa. I can help you get this.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I come to just provide a summary of some of the outcomes that we have discussed. We'll be able to flesh this, and then the Haki Africa team will be able to share with you all. And also, this provides an opportunity just to nuance a number of issues that have come out in this conversation. From the morning session, from the PS conversation, she made a passionate appeal around how there is need for streamlining human rights related provisions around elections, given that elections define the kind of government you're going to have. So one of the things we need to ask ourselves as we move forward is what forms of strategic advocacy exist between human rights defenders, civil society, and the political sector, whether it's political parties, whether it's stakeholders, whether it's IEBC, around that. The other aspect that is also emerging very strongly is the need for us to have a holistic ecosystem approach when you're dealing with accountability. Normally, we look at the fact that the civil society space is very big, and you might actually imagine and say, because it's a children affairs issue, then it doesn't concern me because I'm dealing with women issues. But reality of the matter is that some of these issues, they are progressive and they require a holistic ecosystem approach when we're looking at accountability. It also means that we need to ask ourselves, with a shifting repressive state, how do we create opportunities for reframing our advocacy and our counter-narratives, given the fact that the state will continue on with its trajectory, and there is need for us to be able to have a clear, nuanced approach in terms of dealing with the repressive state. The conversation that also came up and emerged very strongly was the need to have a clear tracker around legislative developments and parliamentary outcomes. Most of us, we see that within the civil society space, we are reacting later when these laws have been passed already, they have been put forward, but even the court decisions, we are getting the court decisions when they are later, maybe they are actually something has already gone at the Court of Appeal, and we are starting now to put up our interests as amicus. So it is already late. We need to have a tracker that can help to track and alert us and have some level of early warning, so that if a repressive law is coming up, we are already aware about it as civil society and human rights defenders and go forward to engage. The other aspect that is important is to look at what you'll call, the collective regime security laws, whether there are laws around insurrection, whether there are laws around sabotage, whether there are laws around terrorism, and to look at these provisions holistically and how they apply to our day-to-day engagements and how they are constantly being changed, so that it is important that there is strategic advocacy and litigation early on, so that we can be able to keep pace with this. Finally, we need to also ask ourselves, in terms of when you're thinking about any pronouncement at the Africa Union level, are we aware and do we have allies within that space in terms of diplomats, permanent representatives that can be able to champion our cause, or we're expecting the goodwill of our presidents to just ratify conventions and treaties that actually will challenge them and challenge their security? So we need to ask ourselves, who are our allies in those spaces? How can we be able to work with them so that we have, of course, the proper treaties or conventions or protocols? And at the same time, remember that it is not just in the production of these treaties, protocols, or instruments that change happens. It is also in the enforcement. As we talked about in the morning, a lot of these are produced, but the enforcement is not there, so there's a big challenge in terms of enforcement. Finally, we need to ask ourselves around the issues to deal with criminalization of dissent and the use of anti-terrorism, because this requires a holistic look at what is happening. Globally, we're seeing the change of the definition around terrorism. Right now, it's no longer jihadi-based terrorism that is actually in the emergent. We are looking at states using dissent as terrorism. So there is need now to reorganize ourselves as we engage around these matters. And finally, there is need for a proper and structured counter-narrative engagement by civil society to ensure that the labeling that the state provides does not necessarily negate change processes that have already been done in the past. This will require that there is holistic engagement with media, digital platforms, and all other influencer entities that will ensure that civil society and human rights defense work retains its originality, retains its capacity to make change, but also at the same time attracts the necessary funding. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for these conversations. We will be able to prepare more of the outcomes and the report and share through Haki Africa. Thank you.
Round of applause for him. Konomore. Tatufungia sasa. Okay, you can use that microphone over there. Yeah, you can use that here microphone, yes. So let's appreciate the board member, Haki Africa, Konomore.
Thank you, Abdikadir. Good evening, everyone. Is it evening? Yes, it's more or less evening. Good to see you all, looking good. Good to see my friends from Zambia who I visited a couple of months ago. I was in Ghana last week also, and our neighbors, Tanzania, Uganda, Tunisia, up north, Nigeria. Good to see you all. We are grateful that you could come to Nairobi and be with us, the rest of us who are based here in this conference and with these conversations. So just to say that we are grateful to all our participants, both our partners from outside the country and our partners based here in Nairobi for finding time the last 2 days to start this conversation. But it's not just to talk, and I'm glad that it's been captured quite well by our rapporteur, but we are starting a partnership across the continent that will see more intentional sharing of experiences, more intentional support to each other, seeing each other in person, visiting each other, connecting online, but giving each other support. I think in our continent today, there has never been a more serious need like now for us to support each other as civil society in the region. If you mirror how governments support each other, allies in government support each other. Last week, I was in Ghana for a conference on political parties, and they're finding a way to support each other and work together as political parties. I think even for us, yes, there are formations of civil society that work together across the continent, but the specific areas of strategic interest that we have in this room and that we have been discussing the last 2 days need more concerted and intentional support. So we're grateful that we're able to build that. Mine is to also, on behalf of Haki Africa, to thank the panelists, those who took time to be panelists and speakers. Thank you very much. We are grateful for your contribution. Our rapporteurs, led by Edward and Collins, thank you very much for your work and experience. And of course, we are grateful for our service providers, including the hotel. I hope the hotel has been good to you all. Huh? Yes, it's very good. I think we're grateful for that. And I want to recognize the Haki Africa staff. I don't know if I know they've been busy running up and down, trying to manage
Haki
things.
Africa staff.
Take a breather, Haki Africa staff.
I think
Just
you can
stand
stand
up
up
where you are. Yes. This is the team, and I think not all of them are here. I think some are probably up and about. So, Haki Africa staff, thank you so much for your diligence. Thank you so much for your work. We appreciate the work you've put in to make this conference a success, as well as my fellow board members. I think it's just Madam Chair.
Board members?
Who's here? I don't know if there's any other. Thank you, Madam Chair, Prof. And we have, I think, one of our trustees, Hussein Khalid. I think my eyes, yes, Hussein. I'm of course downplaying who he is in Haki Africa when I say trustee, but he's the founder of Haki Africa and has moved on to other things, Vocal Africa, but remains a part and parcel of the Haki Africa family, and many others who are in the room who have worked before, former staff, my friend Francis.
Dancer.
It's very rare to see Francis just seated in a conference, listening, talking, giving points. Are you comfortable? I know we are not using your time well by just sitting in a room. Francis is the chief activist in this country, but grateful. But let me not go beyond that. We oftentimes forget our MCs, and my brother Ayub, I want us to just thank him. Thank you very much. Our partners, OSF, is OSF in the room? Oh, they're here in the morning. Forum Civ, thank you very much. Any other partner? Article 19, of course they were here. Article, thank you. Who? Niaje? Simama. Amnesty International, thank you very much. And of course, Vocal Africa. ICJ, is ICJ in the room? They stepped out. Salma, organization yako She Rises. Please rise up, and we appreciate you. And one of our probably very key partners is the social justice centers. Where very good. Thank you very much, the SJCs. I hope it has also been a useful time for you. If I've missed any name, kindly forgive me, because I want to wind up. Two things. One, there is dinner. We still have dinner. Our dinner this evening, we're just going to be, networking. Let's close the conference together and have a discussion around, basically network, but also we want to remember one of our board members who left us 2 years ago. So you're all invited. It's at 7 p.m., still within here, so hang around and let's meet at dinner. Lastly, I just want to I hope you guys have been following the CHAN tournament. Yeah, so Zambians, please escort, as you leave tomorrow, I hope you'll escort your team back. It's not friendly. In fact, I kept holding back. I wanted to text my Zambian friends, but I said, let me not rub it in. Where is our Tanzanian colleague?
No, Maembe.
My brother, how are you? Let's speak after this. I saw a video of one of you, I think your captain, issuing threats. And you're here in our soil. We can hold you back until we decide. We wish Tanzania all the best. I liked the comeback from Uganda. Is Uganda in the room? Very good comeback yesterday.